Hello and welcome to the latest episode of The Brass Junkies. I am your host, Andrew Hitz, and I am joined by my co-host, Lance LaDuke. Lance, how are you doing today?
I'm feeling pretty snazzy.
Snazzy?
Snazzy.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I've been feeling snazzy since the Super Bowl.
I'm full of snaz. In fact, I'm like, there's snaz. I'm getting it all over. It's like there's snaz everywhere here.
Snaztastic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, good.
That sounds good.
It does. It doesn't sound. It doesn't sound appropriate for a.
You have some snaz right on, to the left. Yeah, there you got it.
Oh man, we're losing it. Yeah, we are losing it. We're at the punchy point of the day here. So, our guest today is a horn player with the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra. His name is Zach Smith. He is a funny dude.
He is a really funny dude. Yeah, I've known Zach. Zach is kind of sort of neighbor, and he also actually teaches at Duquesne University, who is one of our newest sponsors. So Zach is one half of the horn faculty there, and is a great teacher, great player, really funny, as you're about to hear.
Yeah, so you can go to the show notes and find the link to Duquesne if you are a prospective student who is looking to possibly go to study with one of the fine professors or Lance
or me
at Duquesne. Then you can. We have to read this link once, right?
Okay,
it's duq.edu/academics/schools/music/students/music-admissions/brass-interest. If you didn't get that, you could just click on the show notes, on the link to the show notes. So,
or just replay that part of the podcast like 66 times.
You could put it in otranscribe.com, which is a free site, upload this file, and then you could set the speed to slower so that you could then transcribe it there, and then you could copy and paste it into your URL of your favorite web browser. Or you can just click on the link in the show notes. So.
Yeah. Anybody could do that.
Lance, there are three people. Are
there?
Three.
There are three people.
Yes, there are three people. You, me, and Zach.
Okay.
We are the ways that you can help the the podcast. 3 ways to help the podcast. Let's just do this super fast. So you can go to patreon.com.
That's the first.
You can go and pledge a small amount per episode. Thank you so much to those of you who have already done that. We are on our way to our next goal, which is $75 per episode. So for any of you who are willing to help us get over the finish line, by the time this airs, it will be very soon after. We got to the $50 an episode level, and Lance and I are posing for a photo with trumpets in our hands. So that was the reward, we'll call it. Was us degrading ourselves to the point of taking like a high school senior picture-esque thing with trumpets in our hands. And our next goal is $75, which we are well on our way to achieving. And so thank you to everyone who is helping out with that, with the ongoing costs. Second way is that you can go to iTunes. You can leave a rating. You can also leave a review, which is super helpful. The most recent one is from Brass Band Trombone is the username, and that is it says first and best podcast, 5 stars. I wanted to start listening to podcasts recently and had no idea where to start. A random search on the podcast app and the Brass Junkies popped up. Instantly, I was hooked with the engaging banter, jokes, and overall great advice that you get from listening to this podcast. I've definitely enjoyed and continue to enjoy everything you put out and cannot wait for the next episodes after listening. Andrew and Lance are probably the smartest people I've ever heard in my life. The last sentence wasn't a part of the review, but I was kind of reading in between the lines. So,
even without the addition of your beautiful, eloquent statement, that's a pretty good review.
That's a very good review. Yes, thank you, Brass Band Trombone, and thank you to everybody who's taken the time to leave a review. You can also just leave a rating if you are busy playing gigs like most euphonium players like Lance are. Says the tuba player. So, and then the other ways that you can tell a friend, and tell a friend, you can tell them where to go. You could tell them to listen to our podcast. But any of you who are giving us your attention, boy, we really appreciate it. There's a lot of directions you can send that in, and yeah, it's very much appreciated. So,
hey, we rolled out Instagram too, so we're going to start putting.
Yes, of course. I was supposed to mention that in the last one and totally forgot. So
what?
Our Instagram handle is pray for the number 4 Yens. Pray for Yens, and we just fired the thing up like a week ago. We've already got 250 followers, and yeah, let me know. Yeah, give us a follow. We'll follow you back, and or if your account is on lockdown, we'll send you a request, and then you can just ignore us and tell us to go buzz off. So. That's it. I think is that all the announcements for the beautiful people?
That's all the things. Nerdtech.
Oh, Nerdtech. We have a live gig. We are taping an episode in front of a live drunk studio / bar audience on April 29th at the Northeast Regional Tuba Euphonium Conference, which is being hosted at Ithaca College. Tubular, which is an awesome tuba quartet that features Carol Yonch and Scott Devereaux. It's going to be great, and we're sharing that event with them. And what could possibly go wrong? A bunch of tuba players late at night drinking, and a live podcast. So
2 of them microphones.
Yeah, with a bunch of microphones. So hopefully Joey, our producer, is going to be ready with the bleep machine. So yeah, because there might be a lot of them. So. All right. Well, without further ado, we are going to get to our interview with Zach Smith of the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra. And today we are joined on the Brass Junkies by one of Lance's colleagues at Duquesne University, which means that we are going to treat him with some emotional kid gloves, because that has to be traumatizing to see this knucklehead in the hallways. I would imagine that the thought process is you see him and you go, oh, there's Lance, and then you realize that your career path is along the same lines as his, and then you probably wonder what went wrong. Am I putting words in your mouth, or?
My first assumption is that he wants my studio, that he's looking for a place to teach, and I'm going to have to tell him to go somewhere else.
That's weird, because schools always treat euphonium teachers so well. I mean, it's like it's right in that same tier with violin teachers, and euphonium. It's like make sure their needs are met, and then worry about everybody else. Is that accurate, Lance?
Where are they going to teach their student?
Yeah. Where are they going to teach their student?
The euphonium's Prince of the band, so they're treated with all due respect.
Well, yeah, and Prince is dead, so there you go. Sorry, too soon. That's not nice. He's like one of my idols, and I'm too soon. So, all right.
If he was alive, wouldn't have heard this. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, this is true. We are huge with Minneapolis-based pop icons, but I don't think he listened to the show. So, Lance, why don't you tell the people who the hell we're talking to, since I've been yapping for a minute and 20 seconds without revealing that yet.
Well, Zach Smith, his day gig is he plays with the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra. And then on the side, he teaches at Duquesne along with me and a bunch of other wonderful folks. And actually, Duquesne is now one of our sponsors. So thank you so much.
Oh, great. Good.
They've hooked us up solid with some advertising dollars. So
that raise you asked for last week, the reason it was rejected was because they're supporting our podcast.
He was negotiating for a room to teach in. That's what it was.
It was easier to just give me some.
That's right. The only compensation we're getting, actually, is that he has a space where he can transmit his knowledge about things like Pineapple Paul and Danny Boy. So, it's really important stuff.
I would argue with you if I disagreed.
It is the low-hanging fruit. So, Zach, how long have
you played with the Pittsburgh Symphony?
This is my 21st season with the orchestra.
Wow.
I started in '96. In fact, my 21st year teaching at Duquesne as well. I started when I first came to Pittsburgh, and it's my 34th year playing professionally.
Jeez. Where were you before Pittsburgh?
I was in Jacksonville for 2 years prior to coming to Pittsburgh, Savannah 6 years, and Oklahoma City in the Oklahoma Symphony for 5 years before that.
Gotcha.
Wow.
And you Pittsburgh as well.
Yeah, moved around quite a bit. So 3 different regional orchestras, and finally ended up in a great city and with a great orchestra.
And which spot do you play in the orchestra?
I'm assistant principal and utility. And in fact, this week I have fourth horn and second horn. I was fourth horn on the youth concerts. I'm playing second on the Grand Classic that we're playing. Played last night, playing this weekend.
So let's start right there. What's it like to play? I mean, you end up playing all of the chairs, basically. At some time or another, you're playing kind of everything. So how do you stay ready to do that?
I have a daily routine that I do. I hate to use the word routine, but it's, for want of a better word, that covers all the aspects of what I've got to do. And I'm pretty disciplined about doing it. First of all, you've just got to keep your chops up. But for my specific job, I've got to really be ready to play in the low range, upper register. Even if I'm not specifically assigned to a chair for a concert, I'll have somebody come up and say, hey, can you cover these measures for me? Or we need these notes doubled in this register. So I'll be playing the first part, and then I'll have to go down to, Dvorak Carnival Overture, which we're doing this weekend. There's a passage at the end that's a big pain in the ass. And now I'm playing second. So I'm playing the lower part. That's not in my part. There are octaves at the end. The sequence, and it comes at the end. You're blown out. Everything's wide open, and then you've got to drill these low notes. So it kind of sucks. So the third shifted the part over to me, and so now I'm playing that lower octave. But when I play assistant, I'm playing the upper voice. But in that spot, I'll go and just plug the bottom note in the bottom octave. So I'll go ba ba ba. And let other people do the other stuff. So you kind of mix and match and fill in that way. So it's not even a week-to-week thing. Every week I've really got to be ready and prepared to cover whatever's got to be covered. It keeps you on your toes, and it just means you've got to make sure you're on a regular basis covering the kinds of things that you've got to do.
I'm assuming that the answer to this is yes, or you would stop doing it. But do you like that diversity? I mean, instead of being a specialist, do you like having to be able to do all of the stuff, or I like the challenge of it. First of all, I love being in the orchestra.
And my goal career-wise was always to be in the best orchestra I could be in, and not to play a specific part or do any specific job. My jobs previous to coming here were all high horn positions, and that's a more comfortable, more natural place for me. My low register's never been my strongest register, and it's always taken a little extra work. But I really like the challenge, and luckily with the colleagues I have and the principals, they make an effort to make sure I stay involved, because you can really wither on the vine in the position of assistant. You play a big piece, a Brahms symphony, which is big for everyone else, and you might play 30 measures in the first movement, 2 measures in the second movement, no measures in the third movement, and then maybe 60 in the last movement. It's not a lot. It's really important that you do it, and it really helps the other players in the section. But if I don't get an opportunity to play second horn on a concerto, third horn on youth shows, do the variety of stuff like that, then it can get a little limiting.
When we interviewed Marty Hackelman when he first moved to Kansas City, he talked about playing assistant with the symphony on some major piece. I don't remember which one it was, but he actually used an analogy that was the only thing that we have actually had to cut out of a Brass Junkies interview. And he said, "I'm never doing that ever again." So, it was very funny. So, and it was a good analogy too. But and the best part was that our producer at the time was trying to. The analogy didn't have any curse words in it, but it was definitely not something that if you were a parent and saw that it was rated clean, and then you overheard that, you would have dove for your kid's phone as it streamed. So the producer was trying to bleep a word here or there and he said that the first thing that he tried to bleep made it sound worse than it actually was, and then he moved the bleep and then to cover another word, and then he said it sounded even worse than that, and that every single bleep that he moved it to made it sound worse and worse and worse, and we ended up just having to cut like 12 hilarious seconds out of the interview. So Marty feels your pain there.
I could use an analogy here that would have to be bleeped as well. I used it on Facebook recently in describing my position. The Europeans call it the bumper, which doesn't mean you bump around from spot to spot. It means you take the shots to the face. It's like you're parallel parking, and bam, you hit the car behind you. Bam, you hit the car in front of you. I'm the bumper. I'm the guy who just punched in the mouth enough times so that the other players, the principal players, are free and clear to feel and play their best when it comes time for it. That's the assistant job, but the utility part of it is and that's a challenge in itself, and I really enjoy the challenge of doing it.
Sure. It's so important too.
It's really important, and really what you want to do is participate and help everyone play their best. You've got to play your best too, but you're helping the whole thing work. But you do take some hits from time to time, and I'll have colleagues will fill in periodically and play assistant, and they'll be like, "Man, got a hard job." And you sit there, and the train's going by at 80 miles an hour, and then you got to jump in. And when you're playing assistant principal, you've got to be the principal horn.
Right.
So when Bill Caballero drops out, when Steve Kostiniak drops out, when these guys aren't playing and you're playing, you've got to be ramped up and you've got to be that guy. You're not kind of treading water and filling in. You're the principal horn.
Wow.
And it's not an easy thing to do.
No, that sounds like a mental challenge, almost as much as the physical challenge too, to be going from passive to screaming exclamation points out of the bell, and then that's very fascinating.
Then the really soft playing as well to help stuff out too. It's doing all the other jobs. You're just doing it in a more sporadic fashion. So lots of challenges there. And again, my goal, my whole career is to play in the best orchestra I could possibly, that I could be in and be a contributing member. And that's the satisfaction of regardless of what position I'm doing. But things get kept lively for me. It's good.
So if you had to choose one of the seats, not specifically in the that'd be a pretty good question though. Hey, if you had to kick one of the members of your section out, who would it be and why? But not speaking your section specifically, but if you had to be stuck on first, second, third, or fourth for the rest of your career, I guess you already said high. Would it be first or would it be third, or what would you choose?
I played third horn in two jobs, my first job and my third job in Oklahoma and in Jacksonville, and I really enjoyed it, and it seemed to play to my strengths in a lot of respects. In Savannah, I played principal, and in some ways, sitting in that chair day in, day out is easier than kind of being on sometimes. And I really enjoyed playing principal. I just turned 57, which is, it depends on your perspective. It's young or not young, but as a performing French horn player, it's not young. And these next few years, however many more years I end up playing, it's going to be a challenge. And I'm really glad I'm not playing principal horn. And quite often we'll be doing a piece, we'll be on tour, it'll be, some incredibly great piece that I love and I've played, but I'll think, man, I'm glad I'm not doing that. Now, maybe that's a bad attitude, but, aging is not kind to brass players, and it's particularly unkind to horn players. So I can't help but look at what ifs or what would I like to do at this stage of the game. But I always loved playing third horn, and again, I felt like it really played to my strengths. I've got a good loud dynamic, and the third horn's kind of got to be the bull of the section. The first horn gets an assistant and gets to drop out. The third horn's just pulling a lot of weight a lot of time. And then they're basically a principal horn as well. For the classical composers, they'll write pairs of horns, first and second, third and fourth. And with Brahms, you've got, in some cases, a more significant third horn part than a principal horn part. But I did really enjoy playing third. Having said that, I love playing all the positions, and I've gotten better as a low horn player. I enjoy second, which is, it's a really tough job in many, many respects. And fourth horn is a lot of fun, too. Fourth horn's kind of like a little independent duchy, its own little kingdom there, where you get to sit down in a semi-autonomous region where you can make your own decisions musically, not regardless of the section, but you're kind of the foundation, and you can play things a little differently. There's a certain amount of independence that is really kind of fun when you're playing fourth horn.
You could always, as Father Time slowly gets larger in the rearview mirror, you could always switch to tuba. The mouthpiece is huge. It basically massages our faces. And, Craig's job is easy. Let's be honest. He just kind of hangs out down there, collects his principal pay, and, and watches people like you work for a living. So I'm just saying that's always an option.
Yeah, the Brahms symphonies for the tuba player, not the same as playing horn.
Those are actually so frustrating because Brahms is also really, really good at writing for the tuba. I mean, it's like there's some really, but he just didn't do it enough. It's like I want to go back in time and smack him around a little bit, because it's really great writing. It's just not very much. So, yeah. Damn Johannes.
So what's the difference in prep at 57 than at 27?
I don't like taking days off. Even at 27, I didn't really take time off. In fact, my wife remembers kind of being shocked the first time I just didn't play the horn on a given day. She was like, well, it just never happens. But you get a little bit older and you get family, you get stuff going on. And I just decide I'm not going to play. But I really, at an older age as a brass player, you've got to really, on a regular basis, be playing, and I mean daily, and not let things get too far out of hand because it's much harder to get back.
Mm-hmm. I tell you, I had pneumonia in January. And,
for like a month and a half.
For a month and a half. I had the flu, and then it became pneumonia, which was fun. And I didn't play for a month and a half, and I had to play a solo last weekend in Michigan. And I was pretty scared. And it took me, I spent about 2 weeks, I'd say. But it was, 2-3 days out from the solo, I was still like, oh boy, this is, the tune is like 7 minutes long, and I'm sweating it. It was like I could get a sound that wasn't the issue, and I could kind of get around the horn. Well, the other part, actually, I grew a beard when I was sick because why wouldn't you?
Yeah, why not?
I couldn't play with it. I kept shaving it more and more. I had at one point the decision was that either it had to all come off or I had to do the inverted Hitler mustache where it was like everything except. What, too soon? No. I just put him down. Sorry. I could go just that strip, mouthpiece wise, above and below my. I couldn't get any notes to come out. So finally, that had to come off, and I could.
You could pull it off. I mean, there are plenty of good examples. There's Ming the Merciless.
True. Good point.
who had nothing on the upper lip, and then the kind of the hair coming down in the beard. That's a good look. So when I was growing up in the D.C. area, there was a really terrific tuba player and repairman, Bob Palanch. Robert Palanch, terrific guy, and my very first horn that I found at a pawn shop he worked on, and I for years and years. I'm not sure if he's still living. Anyhow, he had this kind of the Ming the Merciless thing, but it also looked like Alexander Nevsky from the movie, and he kind of looked like Nevsky. He was very, very angular and very lean, and lots of planes in his face. And I think of that as the Nevsky mustache. The tuba mustache is the Nevsky mustache, and that's because of Bob Palanch. Bob, if you're out there, thanks. It's for all the work you've done, and thanks for all the facial hair memories.
Well, John Stevens is one of a friend of Andrew's and mine, and he taught tuba for decades, and he just did the Amish thing. So he just no mustache but the beard, but got confused as a member of the Amish community frequently. Right.
And the horse and buggy is hell, literally hell on wheels, trying to get to a gig on time. That doesn't work.
I love that Lance was blaming his chop problems on his beard. That's a real trumpet move. Like it can't possibly be my lack of skills in this moment. It must be my facial hair. Yeah, like what else could I blame?
I would argue with you again if I disagreed.
Lance is tired this morning, so I'm taking advantage of it. He's he's a step slow.
Back to your original question about the preparation. It's a little like running. Let's try and get back on track.
Yeah, hey, are you guys the professional podcasters, or am I?
When I was in my 20s, I could be a little out of shape, and I'd run every day for a week, and I'd be back in shape. And those days are long gone. And if I take enough time off playing-wise, it takes a disproportionate amount of time for me to get back where I need to be. It's just easier to pick the horn up and go through the drills and do this stuff. After we're done here, my wife and I are going to drive up to Flint, Michigan from Pittsburgh, and our son is in the Winter Guard team, our middle child, and we're going to see a performance. So I'm wearing my Blue Coat shirt.
I saw that.
Yeah.
It's in honor of Ben, who was in the Blue Coats. But we're going to go see him. I don't know how much playing I'm going to get, but I'm going to bring the rim on a stick, and I'm going to get a lot of work done that way. And we don't have a show tonight, obviously, so I'll be back hopefully by the show tomorrow afternoon, Sunday afternoon, matinee. But I'm not too worried about not playing the horn today because I can compensate in other ways, and you can do that for a little while. There are lots of different ways to skin that cat, but I do have to I can't just ignore my chops and my face and my playing today while I'm in the bar.
How long's the routine?
I start my day doing breathing and then rim on a stick. I like to do that before I mess with the plumbing of the horn and the acoustic of the instrument. I find it's an effective way to get work done. So on a daily basis, that work is going to be anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. It's some gentle buzzing to get myself started. It's playing tunes, which is important, doing it against a drone pitch. And then I do some more specific exercise for the upper register and the lower register, working through kind of gap and break registers. I find the rim on a stick to be much more effective than the mouthpiece. The mouthpiece is almost its own instrument and has its own acoustic, and you start adjusting and compensating for that sound, and then you plug it into the horn and there's a little adjustment period. Whereas just the rim, just isolating the embouchure, tends to be an immediate transference in a positive way to what I have to do on the horn.
How'd you figure that out?
I'm sorry?
How did you figure that out? Was that trial and error, or did somebody turn you on to it?
I never had teachers, and I had great teachers over the years, but I never had any of them promote buzzing on the mouthpiece, which is a little odd to me. I always thought of that as being an Arnold Jacobs tuba trombone thing. Mm-hmm. Horn players, trumpet players whip the mouthpiece out and do a little thing and then plug it into the horn instead of doing more systematic work. So having worked a little with Jacobs and getting older and dealing with stuff, learning a lot more about that technique of playing and that approach to playing, which really works effectively for me, I started doing more of the mouthpiece buzzing. But I always felt, like I said, this disconnect between what I did on the mouthpiece and then what I did on the horn. If I buzzed for 20 minutes on the mouthpiece and got down to the gig or the show or whatever I was playing, playing the horn didn't feel right. I had to take a certain number of minutes to kind of get things lined back up. Whereas with just the lip vibrating, just that isolation, again, it's an immediate positive transference to what I've got to do on the horn. The rim on the stick is a fairly recent thing, and it was Craig Knox, our tuba player, our ace tuba player, listening to him play incredibly well, consistently well, and kind of observing what he was doing and talking to him about it. I started integrating more of his approach. What impressed me, Craig's a terrific player. He's a very disciplined player. Craig would be off for a month, as tuba players are. Trumpet players are off for movements and pieces at a time, but tuba players, they're off for weeks at a time.
Principal pay, baby. Principal pay.
Principal pay. And he'd show up, and it might be a youth show or doing Death of Tybalt or something like that, but he'd be nailing it and laying it down. And I remember talking to him saying, Craig, if I didn't play here for a month and played every day and did all my stuff, I'd still sit down and have to adjust. Pitch-wise, there'd be a lot of things. There's no real duplicating what it's like to sit in the orchestra and play, the kind of dynamic and energy that you've got to have. And Craig seemed to be able to do it immediately. So I took to heart some of the things that he did, some of the work that he did. So strangely enough, tuba player got me doing the rim on a stick. I find it to be a really valuable thing, really effective.
We are nothing if not insightful.
In other words, you're nothing. So, did you say you took some lessons with Jacobs?
After I got tenure in my first job, I spent the summer, it was in Oklahoma. I knew I needed to change my embouchure. I knew I had a fundamental problem with my embouchure, and I was good enough to, have won my job and done lots of playing. I just knew that I needed to make a little adjustment. So I got in touch with Clevenger, and it was the summer after I got tenure. I figured if I really screwed up my chops, it would take them 2 years to fire me with the tenure process. So it was a little bit of a gamble, but I at least had 2 years to try and figure things out. So I spent the summer of 1985 in Chicago, and the embouchure change took about a week to feel totally normal. And Dale was fantastic and knew exactly what to say and what to do. He said, this is what you do. He said, you put your mouthpiece right here. And he dug his thumbnail into my lower lip, and I felt it for about a week. And that's all it took. But while I was there, I took advantage of Jacobs, not in the way that a trumpet player would take advantage or think of taking advantage of him, but I was able to do lessons with him, and then I did his master classes. He did a week-long seminar at Northwestern.
Yep. Did you expect it to take longer than a week? I mean, what was that? How long? Well, let me ask it a different way. How long were you worried about it, and had you been kind of fretting over it? And then, what's the experience of like a week? Then he goes and does the voodoo, and a week later, now it's a new thing.
It had been a good almost 3 years that I had a teacher point out, you've got this flaw in your embouchure. And there are players that have exactly the same thing, like Barry Tuckwell, who don't have any problem. And you play well, but it's something you might want to address. This was Jim Decker out in L.A., who was the first one to really notice what happened. How technical do you want me to get on this?
Yeah, go ahead. What was the issue?
I was a very natural player. I just put the mouthpiece up and played, and I don't know if it happened over time with my body growing, going from being a little kid to an adult, but my embouchure mouthpiece placement slid down to more of a 50-50 setup, and most importantly, the bottom edge of the rim was below the muscle in my lower lip. And so I would push in, and that muscle in the lower lip was essential for protecting the really weak muscle and sensitive tissue of the upper lip, which is where all the work happens. I was bypassing essential protection. So I would play well. Let's say we do a Mahler symphony, Mahler first on a Friday night. Saturday morning was like reconstructive surgery because for all the pressure I was using, the muscle wasn't protecting the upper lip. It was really going straight tissue into tissue. And, we're all built differently. I have very thin lips and a very thin lower lip. So there's not much room there to catch the edge of the embouchure. So what Clevenger did was slide it up just a little bit and seat the bottom edge of the rim just at the connection of the soft red tissue of the lip with the outer skin there. And I was really sitting on the muscle. Dale had me put the mouthpiece under my nose, keep my mouth closed and relaxed, and slide it down. And where that bottom edge of the rim hit, he said, leave it there, let it stick. That's what he said, right here, and dug his thumbnail in. But it became very important for me to have a rim with the right outside contour that I could lock in and feel, and it's still the way I set up my embouchure now. So it was a very small adjustment, but it was so clearly explained and was such a natural thing. I took the whole summer to facilitate the embouchure change, and I on purpose didn't have any performing set up. So I didn't actually have to hit a note at a certain specific time. I could take as much time as I needed. I have a conductor or a group or whatever. But within a week, I was doing gigs in Chicago. I played with Hitz and Brass, I believe was the name of the group. I got hired. We did a show in Orchestra Hall. I played a lot with Grant Park that summer, which was great. And again, I had decided to take the summer off for performing. But there I was in Chicago, and I knew some people, and I played for some people, and I started getting calls to do some work. So it really happened very quickly. And again, it was Dale being really clear about it. I didn't fundamentally change the way I was doing anything. I just repositioned the mouthpiece in a different spot. And it felt a little different, but you just, you don't pay attention to what it feels like. You just make it sound the way it's got to sound. So it was really a very, very quick, painless kind of adjustment.
How often do you face something like that with the students you teach?
I don't like to change embouchures if I don't have to, and unless I really see a flaw. And in my case, as I went in my old embouchure, as I went into the upper register, my lower lip would roll back and under. Instead of the mouthpiece being in place and my lower lip being in place, it would roll back. So then again, 100% of the pressure would be on my upper lip. Unless I see something like that, a flaw that really is going to be a problem. And quite often if somebody plays trumpet and then switches to the horn, then they have that 50-50 setup, or even 1/3 upper lip, 2/3 lower. It depends on your physiology. I don't think there's a absolute formula, but you've got to actually be using the muscles most efficiently and effectively to set up. And if people are doing that, I'm not too hung up on what it's got to look like or what it's got to be. The end result, again, Barry Tuckwell had an embouchure exactly like my old embouchure, and you look at pictures and his lower lip disappears, and you're not going to say he doesn't have a good high register or the guy couldn't play. You're just not going to say it. So, it's not just mind over matter or ignoring what the meat does. But if your body is physiologically set up to produce results, then don't mess with it. And I think over the years, I've wondered why are these really terrific teachers I had, why didn't somebody say this about my embouchure? I mean, and I think I played well enough. They just didn't want to mess with it. Figured that, whatever was happening was working. So I think that's got to be the the end result. But if something needs to be changed, you try and make it work as organically and naturally as possible. And usually it's not a big traumatic thing for anyone.
Well, we can build it into one if we want to in our head.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's refreshing to hear a teacher who went through an embouchure change and yet doesn't then assume that every single student that comes in front of them needs to do the same thing. So that can be pretty common in our business, and it doesn't usually end well. It doesn't seem like to me.
Really doesn't. People say, what should I do? It really depends on the individual physiology. I mean, everybody's lip structure is different. Their dental structure is different. It's you can't just say it's got to be one way. That's a little short-sighted. And you're absolutely right. Teachers will go through something as a player. They'll go through something and say, this works for me, and therefore it's got to work for everyone else. But it doesn't always work in there. There's some very, very famous horn players and teachers, and I'm sure for other instruments as well, who do that, and the results are not pretty, as you said. Really doesn't end well 9 times out of 10. Occasionally a stray will come through. Somebody's bulletproof and they're indestructible.
Sure. Yeah. But then it wrecks some people too. That's the problem. So you got to teach the kid in front of you. That's so important.
Yeah, I'll name names here, but only in a positive way. I mean, Julie Landsman's a fantastic player. She's one of my favorite horn players. She's a great musician, played years in the Met, and she does the Caruso method. And it's fantastic, and it works great for her, and it's worked really well for other people. But I did a Caruso lesson with her many years ago and tried it, and it just didn't work for me. And Julie was open. I talked to her like a week or two after I'd had the lesson, and did the stuff. And I said, "Well, this isn't happening." She goes, "Well, stop doing it."
Amen.
That's really sensible, but specific technique that really works for some people and really does not work for other people. So I think you've got to be careful, and she's judicious about it, and it's what works for her, and it's what she teaches. She's upfront about it, but she's not dogmatic or dictatorial about it. Sure. It just happens to be an effective method. And I think having experimented with something specifically like that, you can say, well, this aspect doesn't work, but these aspects and these fundamental things are applicable, and they work well, maybe for this register or that register. I think you've got to be very open-minded about how you approach not just horn playing in general, but a specific register of the horn and a specific aspect of playing. So,
in listening to you talk, it strikes me that you're very thoughtful and analytical about how you do what you do, and are open to and looking for new ways to do things. How common is that? And again, I don't want you to throw, unless it's a trumpet player, I don't want you to throw anybody under the bus. But do you find that most of your colleagues in the orchestra sort of think that way, and you're all sort of trying to improve your golf swing, or there's some folks where it's just sort of a plug and go, or they don't really talk about it, or you don't have a sense of it?
I think different personalities come into play, and I'm a messer, I admit it, and it's not always to my advantage. If I'm trying to do something, I mean, just in these last couple of weeks, it's not been a lull per se, but I have tried a little different equipment. And what did Pablo Casals say at age 94? Someone asked him why he still practiced. He said, "I'm still under the illusion that I'm going to get better." I mean, it's words to at my stage here as a horn player, I'm still under the illusion that I'm going to somehow magically figure something out. So I am always looking and trying to refine my playing. And again, it's more personality.
Well, it must keep it interesting too, right? I mean, it must keep you wanting to pick it up again tomorrow. I mean, job notwithstanding, it must invigorate you and recharge your battery.
A sense of desperation can be a great motivator. Now, at this point, it's small little adjustments, but it is refreshing to look at something. And I play in the mouthpiece I played for the last 40 years. It would be great to do that. I really envy the people who said, "Well, I just plug this in and it works." To me, it helps keep it fresh and keep it vital. I don't go so far as to change my embouchure every couple of years just to throw down another challenge. But I am looking for ways of getting better. And then you do open yourself up to different techniques and different ways of looking at things like a Caruso method or not just Jacobs, but any different approaches to playing. You're exploring, looking for ways of making things work better and more efficient and easier, frankly.
I think the most boring midlife crisis ever would be, you know what, I'm going to go through an embouchure change.
No, honey, not that. Get a facelift.
I've figured out after all these decades it's not my beard. Yeah, it's just that I suck.
Lance, I would like to have seen you with a beard. I'm sorry you shaved it off.
I know, it was. I liked having it. Yeah, I thought it kind of looked cool. It was very gray. In fact, my son said, "You have a touch of gray in your beard." And I said, "Well, actually, I think there's a touch of color left in my beard."
Do you remember the photos of the Unabomber when they arrested him?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was
He was Unabomber.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good.
The Unabomber was EUNIBOM. Spelling jokes, people. That's
he was
right.
a euphonium player. See, we break things here. Yeah, Ted Kaczynski was a euphonium player. There you go. I think it was baritone, but whatever.
Mm-hmm. Same thing. Tomato. Nobody cares about that, do they?
Let's talk about the difference between baritone and euphonium because everyone is fascinated by that.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody.
Wake me up when you're done.
So, can you? It's been a while, but you have. You won 4 auditions in a short period of time. Can you talk about your approach to auditions and how you think you were able to be so successful?
I took so many auditions. I don't really feel like I was successful.
Honest answer.
I did take a lot of auditions, and I think. Such a cliche, but I think just showing up is number one, the most important thing. It's the resilience that you have to have, because you're going to get told no, and you're going to face disappointment over and over as a performer, not just as a horn player, but as a brass player in general. And you've just got to have a thick enough skin and a strong enough desire to get through it. But with auditions specifically, you number one have to show up. And so I was willing to put myself out and take the emotional ego blows when things don't work out. Auditions are a very specific, different game, and you have to learn how to do that. My approach to working on playing, and I do this with students, is not so much specifically geared towards auditions. And some teachers do that. Mine is more in general in playing and musicianship and developing yourself as a player, and then going to that more narrow focus of preparing for the audition, but do it from the standpoint of being a player, because I've seen players who play great auditions and then have trouble fitting in a section, playing with other people. There may be gaps in their playing that don't get exposed. An audition is a really incomplete process. You get a certain measure of who the player is and what they can do, but it's really day in, day out on the job that you start seeing and learning things. So I think to really gear everything specifically towards the audition is a little short-sighted. I think you've got to be a lot better around it than that as a musician, and then work on the specifics of the audition itself. Don Green, who's got the book Audition Success, a lot of different books. That's a terrific book and gives you a really good practical step-by-step guide about how to get yourself ready for an audition. Playing excerpts for an audition is very different from playing that passage in the orchestra. So there are some narrow specific things that you have to do, but I think the focus more generally on just being the best musician you can be and the most well-rounded player you can possibly be is important. And in my own personal journey, when I realized that I needed a better low register if I wanted to be competitive in some auditions. A fourth horn opening would come up in a great orchestra, and I think I'd love to play there. And maybe I would sound good there, but I wouldn't compete well enough for that specific position. Once I recognized that, I started doing more generalized work for developing myself as a player generally, and not more specifically towards a particular type of job or position.
Have you listened to a lot of auditions in Pittsburgh?
a certain number of auditions. I've been on committees over the years. So yeah, I guess I have. It's fairly stressful, and you think the committee's out there not paying any attention. I find before auditions start, I'm nervous. Mm-hmm. I know what they're feeling up there, and there's a certain energy, and maybe it's just PTSD, but I know what they're going through, and I'm sitting back there, and my pulse is up. I settle down after a little bit, but it's fairly stressful. So yeah, I have heard quite a few auditions.
So what do you listen for?
The number one thing is rhythm, to me, the number one thing that knocks people out. And we just had a third horn audition. We heard a great player. We heard a lot of really terrific players. But the number one excerpt that destroyed everybody was a third horn solo from Brahms' first piano concerto. La la, la 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 la. It's all open intervals. La 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 la, octaves. It's awkward. It's just wide open. But the number one thing was rhythm. And you have la la. La 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 la, and you'd hear people play that long note without subdividing, and there'd be an eighth note short. You play an eighth note pickup, and that establishes your pulse. And if you're not in the right place at the right time after that long note, you're done. It was actually really easy, and I got a lot of reading done in that audition in the first round because it was like the third excerpt, and we had maybe a couple more. But if they didn't play in time there, I just stopped listening. Mm-hmm. It's like being wine tasting, or if it doesn't taste good, you spit it out. You're not going to waste your taste buds on something that's not good. And it sounds brutal and cruel, but I'm not going to listen to it after I've already decided this person's not going to advance. But it was the rhythmic stuff that right off the bat knocked a lot of people out. That specific excerpt, rhythm and intonation. In fact, we had a percussionist on the committee, and he said, "Can we put that excerpt on every single round?" It wasn't just me, and here's a percussionist, and if you didn't play that in time, having established a pulse, then you didn't pass that part of the literacy test for the audition. So that's the number one thing that happens. You can also always tell when somebody's playing a passage, just playing their excerpt, or whether they're playing that excerpt in the context of hearing the orchestra. Oh. And it's one of those sixth sense that musicians have, but you can always tell when they're playing with a soundtrack versus just plugging in and playing those notes. And that comes to the musical aspect of it. You want to hear beautiful playing and with a beautiful, appropriate sound, even if it's style-wise not quite what you want. What's going to grab the committee listening on the other side of the screen or out in the hall is beautiful musical playing. I want to hear, like any musician, you want to hear beautiful playing. It's not just the passing the literacy test and doing things exactly right. Back to that rhythm thing. I was on a violin committee here for a position in the second violin section, and one of the excerpts in the first round was Bartók Concerto for Orchestra, and they went wop wop wah, ba-da-bop bop 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 bop, and I'm like, you're done. And consistently, I was like not voting for anybody, and the committee's string players are voting these guys through. And they say, oh, well, they're this and they're that. And I'm like, they didn't play in time. And everybody looked at me like, so what?
In the violins, even great sections like you have, the time can be more of like a group thing.
It's an amorphous concept. And I said, look, I'm subdividing. Not one of these people that you're voting for played in time here. And they're like, his bow stroke was fantastic.
His bow stroke.
I got a few things to learn on this committee. I'll just be quiet and let you guys decide.
Tell me what I think.
Different perspective, but I think wind and brass auditions, the rhythm is so darn important. That's really the number one thing. Rhythm and intonation, but to me specifically rhythm. If you're not playing in time, you're not going to be able to play with the group.
So speaking of that third horn audition that you had recently, we are actually interviewing that gentleman soon. So would you like to maybe get out ahead of it and maybe tell us some things that Mark didn't do well on the audition, but that he was able to win in spite of?
No, Mark's a terrific player, and I don't want to say anything bad, although our music director, Mark's kind of olive complexion, dark skin. He's got a dark beard and a severe haircut. And our music director asked Caballero, said, is he Al-Qaeda? He wanted to know.
Oh, no.
Which really entertaining. I don't think Mark found it very entertaining. So you're doing Skype, and I know that it's not going to be video. It's just going to be, audio. But ask him. You'll get a good look at him and say, "Are you Al Qaeda?"
Yeah.
He's going to really be. I forgot he was doing it. We carpool together. We're neighbors. We live nearby. So I was dropping him off last night. He said, "You want to come in for a drink?" So I go and I had a drink, a little bit of really good scotch, actually, Oban. But I've had Oban scotch before, but a different label. I know we're not supposed to be talking about drinking alcohol, but it was really good. He picked it up in Europe, and boy, it was really delicious. So I forgot as we were drinking last night at 12 o'clock that he was doing the interview. I knew I had mine this morning, so just had a little after-concert drink. That's really all it was.
You can talk about drink. It's a brass podcast. You remember that, right?
Let's talk about the scotch that you were drinking while you were listening to violins not subdividing through Bartok's Concerto for Orchestra.
That's not part of my audition protocol. Not to judge anyone who makes it a part of their protocol. Being on a committee, it may be because I took so many auditions and I know what they're going through. To me, it's really important to not take it, not be flippant about it, and treat them like meat that's walking out on stage. Idealistic or not, my attitude is they're doing us a favor by coming to this audition. And it's my responsibility to listen and give them time. And we've got it in the contract that the prelims will be a minimum of 5 minutes, something like that. And people complain about it, and I don't care how bad they're sounding, we owe it to them and to the integrity of the process, and out of recognition for what they put themselves through, to let them sit there and struggle through 5 minutes. You may want to cut them off after 45 seconds. But that's really rude and really, I think, inconsiderate of the person and the musician who's up there playing. Again, call it idealistic. I just, I remember spending a lot of money that I didn't have to go to Toronto to audition. It's a terrific orchestra, and I brought 2 horns, and it was, it's summertime, and I'm carrying it. And I played about 45 seconds. I didn't think I sounded that bad, but they cut me, And it's like, I got up, I tucked both horns under my arm, and I didn't say it, but I made a gesture with a finger on both of my hands, the other side of the committee, to the people out in the hall. The personnel manager looked really alarmed, but I was like, I spent, like I said, a lot of money to travel there, and they should have let me play a few more minutes, and then they can cut me. Or then actually you hear people in auditions who maybe get off to a little bit of a rocky start, but they recover. And that's a really important consideration. Well, as a brass player, as a horn player, things are going to go wrong. It's going to happen. It's a fact of life. But how you respond to things going wrong is a really important consideration.
Sure.
And being able, in that instant, let it go and not dwell on it versus missing the next 5 notes that you play as a result is a really important skill for a professional to have. You sit there and you hear somebody miss a note and then go right on. You think that's the person I want to be on stage with, because stuff's going to fly, The rearview mirrors are going to come ripping off. The bumper's going to, all sorts of stuff's going to start coming off the buggy in a live performance. And you've just got to not be bulletproof, but you can't be distracted by it. And quite often you'll hear somebody miss something, and then you'll hear 2 or 3 notes downstream missed, and then they recover. And it's just really important, bam, to get right back on it. And
that's pretty interesting. And there's so much there's so much to gain if you let somebody play for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
There's the person that can play themselves back in. There's someone who can play themselves out. Maybe their first minute is gangbusters.
Yeah.
And then they end up going the other way. Remember the Pepsi challenge?
No, I'm a Coke guy. What can I say?
Well, whatever, in the 80s, they had the Pepsi challenge, and they would have people take a sip of Coke and Pepsi, and people overwhelmingly chose Pepsi, and they started kicking Coke's butt.
Yeah, one of the most successful marketing campaigns in history.
Well, it got Coke to change its formula.
That's right.
Yep.
Exactly right, yeah.
It made Coke blink. It was really pretty impressive.
Yep.
And then what they figured out is that it was the first sip that caused people to choose Pepsi, but if you gave them a full can of Coke or Pepsi, people overwhelmingly chose Coke. So it's that sort of hanging around, that getting past that first impression. I think there's a lot of value there. It's pretty interesting.
And Lance, you're right. I've heard people play their way back into an audition.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a rocky start. They're nervous. Okay, they're nervous. They're human. I've seen great conductors walk out on stage and they hold the baton up and there's a little tremor in their hand. They're human. I'm not going to dismiss them. They're going to work it out of their system. I won't name names with conductors, but some great conductors that I loved working with, they were always jacked up at the beginning of a show. That's good. It's not a bad thing. I mean, it's not good to be out of control, but it means you're really caring and passionate about what's going on. So if a player's got off to a little rocky start, but there's enough foundation there, they can definitely play their way back into the audition. And that's, I think, important for any young brass player listening who's going to take an audition. You miss some stuff right off the bat. You think, well, that's it, I'm done. Well, that attitude means that you are done. Mm-hmm. If you think, I dare to miss every single note I play, I'm going to go for it, then you have a better chance of pulling yourself right back into it. And I think that is kind of the mantra that you've got to have. When you miss something, you think, I dare to miss notes. Bam! You go right back on it. Not, oh my God, I never had that. Then you start, then all sorts of bad stuff starts.
And the wheels come off. Yeah.
Strong and wrong.
Yep. Strong and wrong.
I'm still hung up on the fact that you said that conductors are human. I didn't.
Yeah. What?
I've never heard anybody put it that way. I never.
That was a hot take.
I guess I have a generous spirit. I'm feeling magnanimous this morning.
Yeah, I think that. I'm not sure that the scotch stopped at midnight. I'm just saying.
He said 12. He didn't say midnight.
That's right, and he didn't say where it was 12 either. Yeah, it was in Honolulu.
Our current music director is fairly upfront about his Roman Catholic faith and belief, which I've got no problem with. But New York Times was doing a little feature on him a bunch of years ago now, and they were looking for musicians, and somebody steered to comment on this, and so the Times reporter, we were doing a show at Carnegie Hall, and we're in the dressing room changing. So this guy said, "Go talk to Zach." So this reporter is talking about Honick's deep, fervent belief. He said, "Is that, in your experience, is that an unusual thing to have a conductor have that level of devotion?" And I said, virtually every conductor I've worked with every conductor, the devotion, the worship is of themselves. I thought that was really funny. And I was like, conductors really only worship themselves.
Let me guess, that didn't make the paper.
There it is 2 days later in the Sunday Times. There's my quote.
Oh!
I never discussed it with our music director, but I have a feeling, he certainly read it, and his command of English is good enough to know what I was saying. So,
God bless tenure.
I think God bless tenure. God bless the First Amendment. But I'm not sure he was totally thrilled with it. So, even though I said they were human, I've taken my shots at conductors before. I didn't specifically say him. I said virtually every conductor. So anyhow, but yeah, sure enough, there it was in the Times. Great.
No,
that's pretty funny. Yeah, it couldn't have been the Poughkeepsie Daily Sentinel or something, right?
The Poughkeepsie Daily Sentinel. There you go. We're huge there in Poughkeepsie, actually. Huge.
So you, Pittsburgh Symphony, and you can dodge this. Feel free to dodge this if you don't feel like talking about it. But last fall of 2016, I'm not sure when you're listening to this, Pittsburgh Symphony was on strike for a period of time, and now you are not on strike. And we had Chuck Lazarus talked a bit about his experience with the Minnesota Orchestra when they were locked out, and just sort of what the players did and how they dealt with that situation. So you can go in any direction, including none, with that. If you want to talk about what you did during the strike, what it's like after the strike, we can start talking about conductors again. I just wanted to give you an opportunity if you felt like there was something that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, for my wife Helen and I, this was our fourth strike in our careers.
Wow.
And I spent well over a year of my life now walking on a picket line. And so it was deja vu all over again. But I had at least I have scar tissue from those strikes, the previous 3, and I have scar tissue from this one, but I knew that I would survive it. We knew that we would get through it. There wasn't a kind of blind panic of we're not getting a paycheck. In fact, I talked to people. I talked to Mark Houchin, and who'd never been through it. He was really stressed. I said, look, the money part is the easy part. Trust me. You can't see how that's going to happen, but the money part is not the hard part. It's the emotional aspect to. Here's this thing that we love so much, this music, that we've dedicated our lives to it, and we could all be doing something else. Mm-hmm. And call it arrogance on my part, but we're all smart enough to get jobs in professions where we would be making a lot more money if we weren't musicians. But it's a calling, and it's something we're dedicated to doing. And to have it treated so shabbily and told that what you do is unimportant, not even that you specifically are not important, but what this thing that you love as much as anything in life is got no value, is really damaging. It's really hard, and you've got to deal with that. And it's one thing to think, well, the average Joe doesn't care about a Mahler symphony, the great tuba writing for a Brahms symphony. They don't care about that. You can deal with that. It's when your board of directors and when your supporters or supposed supporters are telling you that what you do has no value, that by God, that really is, that takes an emotional toll, and you've got to really toughen yourself up. The first strike Helen and I went through in Oklahoma, we were on strike for the entire season, and the orchestra folded. That was my real education. It wasn't Eastman. It wasn't a year at USC doing grad work. It was that year on strike, 87, 88 in Oklahoma. It was my first job, and as far as I knew, my only job. But I had a board member tell me, he said, when you get right down to it, you guys aren't even as important as garbage men. All right? And I don't mean any disrespect to garbage men.
Holy crap.
What a rotten thing to say. And look, if nobody picked up our garbage, our society, we'd be in a bad place.
Sure.
You'd have cholera, you'd have all sorts of epidemics. And so I don't doubt garbage men are really important. So why aren't they paid more? Why aren't they compensated better? But to have a member of your board of directors tell you what you do is, he was using it very dismissively to say it's not as important as someone who collects garbage. All right, and this guy, what he does isn't as important when you get right down to it. But it's that kind of demeaning, dismissive, disrespectful, not to me, but to this art. That's the hard part. That's the emotional part. And I guess what I would want to stress to any musician out there is we have to be our own advocates. We can't count on anyone else doing it for us. We luckily with this strike, fortunately, had great support from the community. Really nothing but great support. There are a couple people will say things, and there'll be some attitudes that don't get expressed that maybe won't be as supportive, but huge support from the community here in Pittsburgh. In fact, 2 constituent groups stood up for the integrity of the Pittsburgh Symphony. The musicians, we did that by putting our jobs on the line, and the community. Those 2 groups stood up and said, no, we have a great orchestra, and we need to keep a great orchestra. I'm sorry to say the board of directors didn't do it, and the management didn't do it. They were more than willing to settle for second rate, third rate, whatever. Didn't seem to matter to them. So if we're not willing to advocate and stand up for ourselves and be our own best argument for what we do, we can't count on anyone else. It's not going to happen from anywhere else. It'd be nice just to show up and play your part and go home, but that doesn't work. I'm not sure if it ever worked. I think you've got to passionately fight for what you believe in. And it goes to what we're potentially looking at with the NEA, governmental stuff. You can say, oh, well, nobody really cares, and it saves 0.00001% of the federal budget. But we've got to advocate for the importance of arts in general, in your schools, in your community. No one else is going to do it. And if we as artists, and I say artists not with tongue in cheek, we are artists. We're brass players. I would even include trumpet players in the artist part.
And conductors.
If we're not willing to do it and don't accept the fact that it's our responsibility, then we got to accept the fact that it's not going to get supported. We've got to advocate. And that's really, I think, what I've learned over, one of the most important lessons I've learned over these 4 strikes that I've been through. It's really, really important, and it never ends. I was hoping that things go in threes, and I'd been through 3 strikes, I wouldn't go through another. But as fate had it, we went through a pretty brutal one. And I got to say, Luke, it's a good question. Lance, I called you Luke. Lance.
I'm late for dinner.
Sorry. Lance, you're
Luke LaDuke has got a nice ring
Luke
to it.
LaDuke.
Or I guess we could go with Lance LaDance.
Lance LaDance.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that you go through and you hope it doesn't happen, but you've got to learn something positive from it. And as angry as it makes you, you can't be bitter about it because that'll ultimately infect you. But it's an important thing to talk about and recognize, and it's still relatively early after what was a pretty brutal, emotionally pretty brutal strike. So emotions and feelings are pretty raw at this point. It would be easy to punt and say I don't want to talk about it, but I think it's got to be talked about. Yeah. And I think with our particular situation here in Pittsburgh, there's a lot of unresolved, not just emotion, but a lot of unresolved philosophical issues that are going to have to be addressed, as painful as it may be. I mean, our board of directors up and quit. They gave up. They were lying flat on their backs. We had a former board president say to another member in the orchestra, it's a 120-year-old orchestra here. It's one of the oldest orchestras in the U.S., and he said, well, we had a good run. Is that what you want to hear from the former president of your board of directors? I mean, that's disgraceful. Wow. It's an insult to everything that we love and hold dear with the music we play. It's not about me personally. It's about this institution. I mean, I'm here for a very short amount of years in the history of the orchestra. I represent what happened before me, and I'm responsible for what's going to happen after me. And that's the integrity you bring out on stage. The DNA of everyone who's played in that orchestra is still in that orchestra, and my DNA will be in that orchestra when I'm done playing. It's this living, organic thing, and the responsibility is to nurture and maintain and make it better. And to have a board of directors that didn't feel that way is pretty sobering.
Yeah. Wow.
And I guess it's coming through. I'm still got a fair amount of emotion.
Well, I'm really grateful that you were willing to talk about it. I mean, it's a difficult situation to say the least. And so I'm really glad that you were willing to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for bringing it up. I appreciate the opportunity, but it's not an easy situation. And, I've talked to some people in Minnesota, but and Detroit as well went through a long, brutal thing. It's, it takes time. It doesn't get cured immediately. What you pray for and hope for and do your best to develop is that same kind of let's recover and learn from this attitude coming from the other side of the building, which is the board and the management, really the board.
Well, and I think I want to pick on what you said. I think that a lot of people assume when the strike is over, okay, everything's fine. We're back to normal. Everything's A-okay. And I think this is when the work really starts, right? I mean, you've been off strike for 3-4 months at this point. And so it's very, very new in terms of how do you come back? What does this look like? How do we move forward? How do we... It's got to. I think people just forget that. Okay, well they're off strike, and they just stop thinking about it again. And this is really the most crucial part. I think where you are is the most crucial part. And you had this battle, and it's not all over and done with. Oh well, let's just go back and do what we've got to do. There's a lot of rebuilding that's got to happen. And really, we settled just before Thanksgiving. This is the shortest strike I've ever been in. I went through the season-long strike in Oklahoma, and I went through 2 13-week strikes in Savannah. So 8-week strikes. I mean, come on. I got money from the AFM. It's the first time ever I got money from a strike fund, and it wasn't a lot. But it's like, man, I'm living large here. Let's go buy some vacation property somewhere.
And scotch.
And scotch. And so it settled just then, but we didn't really get back together as an orchestra till January. We had played Christmas Pops. We played one show. I was working in Philly that week. We had great support from orchestras around the country. People were playing everywhere. In fact, I'm playing second this week because our second horn, Bob Lawver, is in St. Louis. And I don't know if it was something he got hired to do during the strike, but they must have looked at the schedule and said, well, we're doing Alpine Symphony in March, and we'd love to have you come. And he said yes. But it really wasn't until January that we got back together as a group. and people are still kind of going here and there, not so much. So it's been shorter than 3-4 months. It's really been only about a month and a half, 2 months now that we've been back, and very little contact with the management and the board. And there's some management people, top management people, we don't want to ever see again, frankly. And it sounds brutal, but we have one person in particular. For me, I don't ever want to see this person. They shouldn't be working in the organization. They tried to destroy the Pittsburgh Symphony. Without any knowledge or comprehension of what the Pittsburgh Symphony is. They had zero experience working with orchestras or nonprofits. And was the lead quarterback at the negotiating table. Now you're getting me mad. I don't want to see this person backstage. A lot of us, like physically, what are we going to do if we see this person? I'm not great about holding my tongue, as becoming apparently obvious here. My wife is standing, going, "No, stop!"
Stop. Pull up.
Tell us how you really feel.
But there's that kind of passion. It's not just an emotional rawness, although it's there. It's a passion, and if that passion that we have out on stage is not reflected throughout the organization, then I don't know why you're working for the Pittsburgh Symphony or the Minnesota Orchestra or the Detroit Symphony or any orchestra anywhere. If you don't share that passion, then go do something else.
Throw him a red piece of meat, Lance. You're just across town. Go deliver it.
Right.
So one of the things here at the Brass Junkies that we specialize in is excruciatingly awkward segues, because you're talking about like things that are as important as you possibly can talk about as a musician, and I'm now going to ask you to make fun of our friend Jens Lindemann. So they go hand in hand. Like. So in keeping with the
take out your anxiety and anger.
Yeah. I want you to imagine that this it sounded like, I think you said that this gentleman from the lead quarterback of the Negotiators, imagine his name was Jens Lindemann, and imagine that he was a trumpet player. I want you to imagine that he's going through some chop problems. And so what advice would you give to Jens? We can bleep it out if we need to. But what advice would you give to Jens in this time of need?
Specifically, chop problems for a trumpet player, the only real remedy is preparation H. It's a miracle, but really for trumpet only. Preparation H on the chops, and man, that itching and swelling is gone. Just like that.
There may have been one Boston Brass tour a number of years ago where one of our trumpets, Jeff Connor, may have shown up on for the tour with a cold sore on his lip, and I may have seen him at the airport, and I said, "Hey, what's up, Herp Albert?" And which I think Lance says something that quick like 10 times a day. That was maybe my quickest moment ever, and he immediately just looked completely dejected because he knew that was, and I think it was Jose who was next to us, who was, "Wah!" and then he was called Herp Albert for the entire week and a half that we were on the road. Like, he heard it probably 500 times. So thank you for reminding me of that. That face that Jeff made that was the reason why I made fun of him, was because when you're a road musician, that kind of stuff makes you feel alive because you're really dead inside.
Right. Every time you see him, you start singing "This Guy's in Love with You" too.
So preparation H for Jens. There you go. See.
Yeah.
See, we do the awkward segues because we do them well, right? I mean, we talk about someone literally trying to steal the art that you're making away from the city that you call home and love, and then we go right into preparation H and and herpes.
I don't think it's just a horn player thing. I think it's brass section thing is the need to laugh as an essential release. And I don't think certainly conductors don't understand why the horn section is back there behaving like a pack of hyenas, and really the behavior is inexcusably bad. But we've got to find some outlet. You've got to find some way of getting rid of it. And laughter is the best medicine there.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Well, there we go. Look at that. He just tied a nice bow on this. You could also be a professional podcaster. I mean, there's a strict licensing process, and we could walk you through it if you're ever interested. But Lance, is there anything else?
No, I don't. After you put butt cream on a trumpet player's face, I don't know where to go.
Butt cream, cold sores, and and strikes. These are going to be interesting show notes.
Right. That's kind of our signature. We get we try and hit the entire spectrum of brass knucklehead. Like really insightful stuff about how to play, how to warm up, how to prepare, how to audition, how to fix your embouchure, and then
and
the other.
The other. All the other that's fit to print.
That's right.
Good.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Zach. This has been really great. We really appreciate your time this morning.
I appreciate it too. It was a lot of fun. I wouldn't have I thought going into it, spending an hour on the phone with Lance would be fun, but turns out that it worked out pretty well.
I bet your next visit,
Andrew would come talk to me through the glass. He thought the same thing. Eventually, I wore him down. But, yeah.
Now, Lance, are you just down the street, or are you? Where are you?
I'm across town. I'll be back across. I'll be back down the street later today.
All right. Very good.
Yep.
Very good.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, that is going to do it for another episode of The Brass Junkies. You've been listening to The Brass Junkies on the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network. If you would like to help support the podcast in order to make more episodes like this one possible, please visit pedalnotemedia.com/donate for more details. Also, be sure to check out our latest recording, The Brass Recording Project, at brassrecordingproject.com. The Brass Junkies is produced by Joey Santillo. Executive producers are Andrew Hitz and Lance LaDuke. This has been a presentation of the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network.